Hello! So this is part 3 of my Introduction to Objective Personality series. This one is going to be talking about observers versus deciders. So functions can be divided into observer functions and decider functions. The observer functions are those that are primarily concerned with things and making observations. It includes the sensing and the intuition functions, SI, SC, NI, and NE. These functions cover the human needs of organize, which is either SI, organizing the facts and sensory information, or NI, which is organizing concepts, or the human need of gather, SC, which is gathering the facts, or NE, gathering concepts. So OI is an abbreviation used to describe an introverted observer function, and OE is the abbreviation used to describe an extroverted observer function. So OI versus OE makes up a binary coin in objective personality. So on the OI side, you have the organized human need. On the OE side, you have the gather human need. So if you're stronger in the organized human need, you're going to be weaker in the gather human need and vice versa. The decider functions are primarily concerned with people and making decisions. These include the thinking and feeling functions, TI, TE, FI, and FE. And they cover the human needs of self, which is TI, and FI. So TI is about your own personal logic, what works for you, what makes sense to you, and FI is your own personal feelings and values about things. And then the tribe functions are TE and FE. So TE is looking at the spectrum of logic and reasons of other people, what makes sense for people, what's going to work for people. And then TE is the tribe spectrum of human values. DI is the abbreviation for an introverted decider function, and DE is the abbreviation for an extroverted decider function. So DI and DE makes up another binary coin in objective personality. So on the DI side, you have self. On the DE side, you have tribe. So those that have a stronger human need for self will have a weaker human need for tribe and vice versa. Everybody has everything, but one side is going to be stronger than another. So this leads us to the concept of single observers versus single deciders. So single observers are those types that lead with an observing function, either S or N. This includes all of the IJ types and all the EP types. So the IJ types will lead with SI or NI, and the EP types will lead with either SE or NE. Now, the function that's the top function in your stack, the fourth function or the bottom function in your stack will be the opposite. So as a result here, these types here, the IJs and the EPs, are said to be imbalanced on the organized versus gather coin, because the IJ types are leading with either SI or NI, which is an organizing function, so their bottom function will be either SE or NE, and that's a gather function. So there's an imbalance there. And as a result of this, we call them single observers because they tend to ignore one side of the observational board. Like an ISTJ, for example, is leading with SI. So their bottom function in the stack is NE. So this means that they have a tendency to be all in on organizing the facts and sensory information around them, and they might be ignoring the the any side of the coin, gathering the possibilities. Whereas an ENFP would have the opposite problem. They're leading with any, being all in on gathering abstract concepts and possibilities, but maybe having a tendency to neglect organizing the sensory information. However, these single observer types are going to be more balanced on the decider functions, the thinking and feeling functions, because both of these functions are in the middle. So they're called double deciders for short, DD. So like an ISTJ has thinking and feeling in the middle, so they can relatively easily go back and forth between considering both their self-human need as well as the needs of the tribe, and then balancing their decisions, looking at both the logic, the thinking, as well as the values, the feeling. Now, single deciders are the opposite. So these people lead with a deciding function, thinking or feeling. These are the EJ and the IP types. So the EJ types will lead with TE or FE. The IP types will lead with either TI or FI. So these people are going to be imbalanced on the self versus tribe coin, because if they're leading with a self function TI or FI, that means their tribe function FE or TE is going to be last. And they can tend to ignore one side of the decision-making process. So if they're leading with TI, for example, like an ISTP would, their primary focus is going to be on what's logical for me, what makes sense to me, what works for me, but they might be ignoring that spectrum of tribe values. And then ENFJ, on the other hand, is going to be the opposite, with lead FE, with a tendency to ignore the TI side. Now, the single deciders, they're going to be more balanced on the observer functions because those are in the middle. So they can more easily go back and forth between the need to look at the facts, the data, the sensing, and then also the intuition, the overview, the big picture, the assumptions. So single deciders are also going to be what's called double observers, or abbreviated as OO for short. So this leads to a very important distinction. There's a binary coin called single observer versus single decider. And this is a very important coin to consider because this kind of deals with what somebody's biggest issues in life will tend to be. So on the single observer side, the IJ and the EP, their primary issue in life is going to be about things, which is the organize versus the gather. That's where their biggest imbalance is going to be. But they're going to be relatively more balanced with the people side of things, the self versus the tribe human needs. So single observers, for example, like if you have an IJ, they're going to tend to fret about chaos, unexpected chaos that comes their way. Because like if they're a lead SI type, they're looking at all these different facts and they're trying to organize them and narrow it down, and they might completely overlook abstract possibilities that are surrounding them. Or if you have a lead NI type, they're all in on trying to gather concepts and narrowing that down, and might struggle with random sensory information that comes in that doesn't fit in with their organized concepts. Like let's say all of a sudden the computer breaks down and doesn't work properly. They can fret about that. Now, somebody that's an EP type, they're going to fret more easily about feeling like they're being controlled. People are controlling them. and they're stopping them from being able to do what they want to do the most, which is gather, whether that be concepts with the NE or sensory with the SE. Now, they're going to be more balanced with the people side of things because, again, those functions that pertain to self and tribe are in the middle. So, they can easily go back and forth between paying attention to their own self needs versus the tribe self needs, balancing them out. And they can also kind of be more easily see both sides of themselves. They can see both the good and the bad in themselves as well as other people. Whereas a single decider, the IP and the EJ, now their primary issue in life is going to be about the people side of things, the self versus the tribe. So like an IP type, they might be all in on their own self function, whether it's TI, what works for me, or FI, what I personally find valuable. And then, their struggle is, why isn't the tribe going on board with myself? They might be oblivious to, there's a whole spectrum, the whole tribe spectrum of thoughts or values that's very different from my own DI function, and then they got to work around that. However, the single deciders are going to be more balanced with the things, the organize versus the gather. So they're less likely to get worked up about, sudden chaos that creeps into their life. Like the computer all of a sudden doesn't work, because they're able to see both the sensory facts as well as the intuition, the big picture. Or, issues of control, they don't get as worked up over that either. Even if they prefer gather over organize, if they have gather in the middle and organize in the middle, they might still see the need to have some control in their life. Yeah, the government's controlling me, but we do need some rules and order in life, but we don't need every little thing controlled either. It's just more of a healthy balance there. Yeah, so that's a bit about single observers versus single deciders. So I just briefly want to touch on what I'm going to be covering in the next videos, just to kind of give a general overview here. So the next video is going to be talking about savior functions versus daemon functions. So to just be very brief here, savior functions are those functions that we tend to be comfortable using, and we tend to do them on autopilot, whether we realize it or not. And daemon functions are functions that we tend to be less naturally comfortable using. Now, we may still want, the needs of those functions, but we would tend to get our savior, we tend to get our daemon functions through using our savior functions. This is going to expand the code from 16 types to 32 types, because the savior functions can either be your first and second function, or they can be the first and the third function. So for half the types, they actually jump over the second function in favor of the third, and those are called the jumper types. So yeah, so it's going to expand it to 32. And then there's also what's called animal stackings. So an animal stacking shows how the functions are communicating with each other, how strongly they're interacting, and how strongly activated those functions are. And it's not necessarily the top functions that are the most activated. Anecdotally, you might think that, but for some types, it might be the bottom functions that are actually getting more activated, or like the first and the third function, so or the second and the fourth. So this is going to lead to an animal stacking, which is going to expand the code to 128 types. Now, this is a bit more complex concept, so I'm probably going to spend 2 videos or maybe even 3 videos discussing that. But it does lead to some real interesting differences between people of the same base 16 type. It may explain why some people don't look like the standard Myers-Briggs version of their type. And then finally, there's sexual modalities. So functions can have, I guess, like a sexual charge to them, like a masculine version and a feminine version. So the masculine version is more punchy, solid, shovey, and the feminine function is going to be more flowy and flexible. And that's going to lead to 512 types, because even if people are the same regarding their savior functions and the same regarding their animal stacking, they might have different masculine and feminine functions. Yeah, so that's where I'm going to be headed. Now, I will be sharing a link to my slides here, so feel free to use these slides however you like. If you want to share them with other people, go ahead, be my guest. These slides are not copyrighted, nor do I plan to copyright them. They're free to use. So if you want to see more videos in this series, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button for notifications so you can be notified when I'm going to have more videos up. All right, you have a great day. Bye-bye.